I'd like to consider myself a bit of a roguelike aficionado. I can say that because no one can even decide whether it's called a roguelike, a roguelite, or what the difference is between the two. I mean, I can guarantee that having just brought this up, the comment section is going to be full of people correcting me, arguing with each other, or setting fire to something. I just seem to gel with them. Super difficult, endlessly replayable, but also easily picked up and played through to completion within an hour or less. They attract me like a moth to a flame, a naked flame, one that immediately explodes me, but then the moth in this metaphor just comes back to life again, maybe with a new hat, and then it explodes again. They're not all good though, and even the ones that are good, they're not all for me. I'd say my hit rate on finding an indie roguelike and sticking with it is maybe 40%, and the reason for that is because the first two that I truly fell in love with were The Binding of Isaac and Spelunky. These two games pretty much ruined the vast majority of similar games that came afterwards. They were too good. So colour me surprised when I find Tiny Rogues. There's two things that drew me to Tiny Rogues outside the fact it was an action-based indie rogue adjective. Firstly, it was under a $5 on sale, and secondly, it was sat at overwhelmingly positive on Steam, both in recent reviews and overall reviews. Why had I never heard anyone talking about this? Is this just going to be another meme game that the internet decides it's funny to like? Is this just Bad Rats all over again? No, Tiny Rogues is not only dirt cheap, it's one of the best let's just think of a different genre name please type games I've played in the past 5 years? 8 years? I don't know. All I know is that I absolutely love this. The concept is as basic as the graphics. You pick a character, 90% of which are progression locked, but me being an expert, I've got them here already. Each character has different starting equipment, stats, and a bonus characteristic, which you can choose to try and build their equipment and stats around. You choose someone, you drop in, and then... It's beautiful. This game is pure action, what one might consider bullet hell, but it's a bullet hell that is manageable outside, perhaps, one of the final bosses, which is a shit show, but it's a telegraphed shit show. Death is generally on you and your uselessly slow fingers. You're granted a pretty lenient dodge mechanic for starters. A tap of the spacebar will zip you away in the direction you're walking, giving you not just iframes for the dash, but for a short moment after too. Not sure what an iframe is? Basically it means you can't be hit. I'm just trying to show off by using fancy terms. I think the I stands for incredibly cool. Let's go over those other controls while we're here. WASD to move, those are buttons on a keyboard if you're really far behind the curve. The mouse is used for aiming and attacking, and those are the basics. You can also look at your inventory and you can check your stat sheet, but who cares about that? What's the game like? Each run in Tiny Rogues follows the same path. You go from this dungeon to this dungeon to this dungeon. Each of those dungeons features the same enemy types, sometimes with slight tweaks, and each of them has their own pool of bosses. Your goal, because this is a video game, is to work your way through each of these without dying before confronting the final boss. But is it the final boss? It's not. But is it? You'll have to find out. I'm not going to spoil that. It's not the final boss though. So far, so very indie rogue whatever, but what really amps this game up in the enjoyment division is the sheer wealth of weapons, items, options, everything. There's just so much to experiment with here, and it all feels absolutely perfect in the hands. It feels base to say no two runs feel the same, because that's something I imagine IGN would say, but it's true. No two runs feel the same, because there are so many different ways to build your character that you'll end up wanting to try out not just all the different methods, but what you think is going to help your character in the current situation they're in. After each room is cleared of enemies, you're given 2 doors, each with a different reward. You go for what you think is best in that situation. Need a new weapon because your current one isn't up to snuff? Go that way. Need some bombs because you've depleted your supply? Go that way. These simple binary options build up over the course of gameplay until, by the end, you've hopefully built the perfect character to take on the boss, which may or may not be the final boss, which it isn't. In the interest of keeping things short, I'll leave the details there, but there is a wealth to discover here. If you're a fan of fast-paced action, bullet hells, character building, things that you can just pick up and play and feel like progress is being made in some way or another, I simply can't recommend Tiny Rogues enough. It is unnecessarily good at what it does, and it being in early access, while also being this good, you may as well consider this less early access and more the chance to pick up a fantastic game cheap and early, and then get some free DLC and quality of life improvements further down the line. Highly recommended.